Welcome back. I'm here talking with author Nathan Schneider, who wrote the book, Thank You, Anarchy, Notes from the Occupy Apocalypse. Nathan, what political changes came out of the Occupy movement?
Well, I think an important political change involves changing how we think about what politics is in the first place. This is something that I noticed among a lot of people who came in thinking very much in terms of, it came into the Occupy movement initially, thinking very much in terms of Democrat and Republican, what Barack Obama will and won't do or has and hasn't done. And through the movement, through the kind of grassroots work, through the self-sufficient, more or less, encampments that it spawned, they started thinking about politics more in terms of what they need, what their communities need, what their families need, and how they can bring that about. Now, that isn't to say that there hasn't been an effect in electoral politics, and you saw that, I think, in the re-election of Barack Obama, as he depended so much on painting Mitt Romney as a representative of the 1%, and we've certainly seen that in New York City with the election of probable mayor-to-be Bill de Blasio, who ran extensively on a campaign about income inequality, about racial inequality, issues that in New York City were really brought to the fore by the Occupy movement.
You mentioned President Obama. Could progressive Democrats breaking from President Obama still use the Occupy movement to further their support?
I think that's a really tough question because a lot of people in the movement are going to be very suspicious about any attempts of politicians to use the movement for their purposes. And this represents a real difference between Occupy and the Tea Party. Clearly, the Tea Party, as soon as there was an opportunity to be embraced by our political system, by electoral politics, they took it. And the result was that a movement that came up very much in reaction to the bailouts in the 2008 crisis, that was very suspicious of corruption in politics, became bought into the political system as it is, became bought into corporate power. And having seen that, organizers in Occupy are very, very, very reluctant to get involved in that sort of thing. And they want to focus on building from the ground up. If you're going to make a parallel between this and something kind of similar on the right, I would actually compare the Occupy movement more to the churches of the right. You know, these are organizations that come up in a grassroots level that serve people locally, and they're also a base of political power, but they're different from a political party.
Well, let's talk about the purist Tea Party, because you just reflected upon when the Tea Party was started as a reaction to the bailouts, even during the Bush administration, and then being co-opted by political campaigns and used for their own benefit. But are there any issues that the Tea Party and the Occupy movement share, actual issues themselves?
Yeah, you know, and actually there was some overlap initially between the Tea Party and the Occupy movement, just in terms of people who would come. You'd run into people who were like, oh, you know, a few weeks ago I was at a Tea Party rally, you know, who were at Occupy. I think there's a deep concern about the role that the government is playing in its relationship with the financial industry, the way in which there's something that is not fair here, that ordinary Americans got sold out in the process of the bailouts. Another thing that people have identified that the two share is a deep concern about the growth of the security state and the way in which surveillance is being used by our government to curtail our civil liberties. Those are two very profound things that these two movements share. I think there are also profound differences. You know, the Occupy movement, is very, very concerned with the growth of the military. They're very concerned with, it's far much less nationalistic, far less concerned with borders and immigration. The occupiers actually often tend to want borders eliminated in general. They see themselves as a globalist movement rather than simply a nationalist, patriotic movement in the United States of America. I think there is a real major cultural and generational difference there.
As far as individuals who are holding public office now, are there any that you see who adhere most closely to the ideals of the Occupy movement?
Sure. Well, there are certain people who've come into office, actually, I think largely on the heels of this rhetorical shift. You look at somebody like Elizabeth Warren in Massachusetts, and I've already mentioned Bill de Blasio. But there's, I think the way in which they're using what the Occupy movement created, is also, it also forces us to recognize its limits. I mean, we've seen politicians adopt the language of the movement, adopt the rhetoric of the movement, and ride that wave. But it's not so clear that they're adopting the policies. And we see that with President Obama pushing the nomination of Larry Summers. We're seeing this, in the way in which his policies toward the financial industry have shifted a little bit, but not really significantly, not systematically. And so what we're still waiting for, and what I think a lot of us want to build, is a stronger movement that can make good on the hopes that Occupy instilled in so many people's hearts. And, and that means transforming the strategies of organizing rather than just a kind of performance, which I think so much of the Occupy movement was, building deep political relationships on the ground with people, building political bases, and winning campaigns.
Got one more question for you, and then we got to run. Let's talk about reigniting the Occupy movement. Do you believe that the president's recent call for action in Syria and the growing distrust of government based on all the different scandals we've seen as far as NSA whistleblowers, IRS targeting, even Benghazi, do you think any of these issues would help to reignite and respark the Occupy movement?
They could. These are really important, and the public outcry has been significant. Not significant enough in the view of many people. And these are things that occupiers saw coming. And in many ways, they're not surprising to people in the Occupy movement because, in a way, occupiers were the canary in the coal mine. They were experiencing the brunt of the security state ahead of time, and laws were being passed over the course of the movement, specifically targeting it and allowing police forces to use more and more draconian means against them. But it's a real question. How will Americans react to this? And I think the real question is not so much, are these conditions going to force us to do something, or are these conditions going to push people? But are people gonna rediscover the tools of grassroots organizing, of building power, of working together to confront entrenched power, and feel like they can actually do something? Because I think the problem for most people is not that they agree with what's going on, but that they feel helpless. That's where we have to look at the movements of the past to build the movements of the future.
Nathan, thanks for joining us on the program. Where can people find your book?
My pleasure. They can find my book at Amazon or pretty much any bookseller. You can also get it directly from my publisher, University of California Press.
Throw out the title one more time for us.
It's Thank You, Anarchy, Notes from the Occupy Apocalypse. All
right. Thanks again, Nathan, for joining us. Nathan Schneider, he's also the editor of WagingNonviolence.org. Stay tuned. We have more news ahead. We've also got the rest of today's headlines, and we've got a full report on the weather. We'll be right back.